We're moving right along. I'd like to let's try some questions. If does anybody have anything that they would like to ask of our distinguished? They're back in the back.
I'd like to ask Dr. Taylor your favorite Harlem spot to perform in.
I'm supposed to repeat the questions, and Billy, the question was, what is your favorite Harlem spot to perform in, now or then?
Well, the first place that I really worked on a regular basis was a place called Wells. And Wells was a wonderful place for pianists because Wells always had at least one pianist, usually two, and a singer in those days. And he served chicken and waffles, and among other things. But many of the people would come out of the Apollo or come out of the dance hall or something and go around. It would be 12 o'clock or 1 o'clock in the morning, and they'd have to have breakfast. They would have chicken and waffles. But Wells had really a wonderful idea. He had a piano and organ, and so I was playing the piano, and there was another fellow playing organ. And he, so this is way before the electric organ became the kind of popular instrument that it was just about to happen then. But that was one of the places where it started, because people like that sound. And so Bob Wyatt was the guy that I played opposite. And he was a classically trained musician who played all kinds of Bach and did a lot of wonderful things. But he could swing, and he had a good. We had a lot of fun playing. We had a thing that we did together with Sylvia Sims. We did down at the Royal Roost, but we started it up in Harlem.
Another question. Yes, right here.
If Dr. Taylor could tell us the Ben Webster story.
Well, he just did. That was the story about the third day in New York. He was working with Ben Webster, which is quite fun. And the most interesting thing about that to me is that it's now a couple of years later, and I don't think he's been off more than a couple of nights. I mean, you know, he's here tonight because he doesn't have a gig, but he's worked steadily since 1941 or 42 without a break. Any other questions? Yeah, yes.
I'm finding that apart from WBGO, where I hear jazz most prominently on the radio is in theme music for radio programs. It's very interesting that for the general public, jazz has practically fallen below the horizon. Of course, there's still a lot of it going on that people aren't aware of. But yet, Leonard Lopez uses jazz for his show on WNYC, and there are a few others.
One of those problems, though, that you're referring to, I played at, did a lot of shows for NPR. NPR dropped the ball. They decided that they were going to really cut back, and they cut all the music. When I was on the air for NPR, we had at least 200. Before Jazz Alive, we had at least almost 300 stations that were carrying jazz all around the country. Before I left, they had cut down to such a way that almost those were. I'm very bad on years, but yeah, right, yeah, sure, 72 days, you're right.
But you know, WBGO in Newark shows you what can happen when people know what they're doing and know how to run a station.
Right.
And they have such a diversity, all of it first class and very challenging. And there's good news for New Yorkers. They're getting a transmitter here in New York, so I can stop buying radios so I could get the signal.
Yes.
What made you think a jazz festival would work during the daytime when it was habitually a nighttime adventure?
The question, I guess, to George is, what made you think that a jazz festival would work during the afternoon when it was usually a nighttime kind of music?
A few riots I had up at Newport made me think like that. we found out that Newport they weren't really riots, they were incidents. We don't call them riots, they were incidents. But when I went back to Newport after starting New York, up which the Newport, New York, which became the Cool Jazz Festival and the JVC Jazz Festival in New York, I knew that a town like Newport's a small town, and you have to be aware of everything. You know, when you're young, you're only thinking of the music. And that's all I thought about in those days, back in the 50s, you know. I mean, what the heck? You had Miles, you had Duke, you had Ella, you had you didn't think about anything else. But then you realize you had to relate to the town. And when you release 10,000 people at 1 o'clock in the morning in a small town like Newport, Rhode Island, there's a potential for trouble. And so what I did when I went back there from New York, starting, I think, in 1980, 81, I said, I'm going to do something in the afternoon, and it's worked very well. It's not like it was before, but it's a good festival. It's coming up in the week after next, and if you're in Newport, come, we need you.
Well, actually, if you remember, you started doing those afternoon things. We did thing with all the piano players, and we did a whole lot of things with all the drummers, and those were afternoon. They were kind of throwaways because you brought everybody in that was on the festival practically, and it was a lot of fun because quite often most of us didn't get a chance to play with each other like that, and that was the closest thing to some of the things that happened at Minton's and happened in Boston, really, at your club and a few other places.
One of my lasting memories of Newport, and I'm not in the least religious, was Mahalia Jackson.
Oh, yeah.
On a Sunday morning in a church there. She almost converted me.
Yes, sir. Ken.
Much like classical music, many people who are interested in jazz are concerned about the graying of the audience. We're here to talk about that. So what do each of you think can be done to carry the message out to the younger generation now and try to bring them along to appreciate this music?
Well, we're going to need a lot of help from people like you and other people who recognize the fact that the music is there, the players are there, the places are there. What we really have to do in music is to find the one thing that's going very well is schools that teach jazz all around the world, not just in New York, but all around the world. At the Kennedy Center, I have at least 4 different programs that teach people how to play jazz, and we could use 4 more if money made it possible. But the idea of having young people play is wonderful, but they have no place to play. There are a lot of young people that I know that go to Manhattan School, go to other schools, and they live in Harlem. Because that's closer to the things that they've read about and heard about, and they want to be a part of that. And there's a young man that who worked with me for several years, and he's now out on his own doing very well. His name is Eldar. He's one of the best pianists I've heard of all of the young kids around. He's really a phenomenal player, but he's not getting a chance. You don't know about it. I mean, and if this were 10 years ago, everybody would have heard about it because he would have been on the radio, he would have been on television, he'd been all the places where you would have nobody's really working on that. Except some few people who are aware of who he is and what he is and are trying to make it happen for him. But he needs a lot of help, and so many of the other, that's one of the stories, and he is one of at least easily 100 people that I can think of.